All right, here's my audience for my speech. And here I go. All right, my name is David, and I will be giving a persuasive speech on video game violence and adolescent violence. Now, more and more video games are being released, and with those games, they're becoming more and more violent. And the violence today, compared to the violence of video games in the 90s, early 2000s, is a lot more. For instance, the game Call of Duty, a virtual war game, is very realistic and very violent. Now, when a violent act happens, especially one that involves minors, people want answers, and for good reason. The media loves to blame video games when these things happen. For instance, 1999, when the Columbine massacre happened, 2 very disturbed students shot up the school and eventually took their own lives. Now, people were outraged at this, and they want to know why they did this and what caused them to do this. One of the reasons, they said, was that they loved to play the game Doom, which was a popular game in the 90s. They thought that the violence from this game caused them to commit the violent acts they did, and therefore blame the video games. Now, the truth could be anything but that. But video games do not cause people to do violent acts. And if they don't, then what is to blame? The environment of the child or adolescent is the main cause of these acts. For instance, the people they surround themselves with, how they're raised, and where they live at are all major things in deciding if this child commits an act or not, or if they're diagnosed with a mental illness. And there are plenty of programs, at-risk programs for children in schools to help with these things. However, if we put more focus on these programs rather than blaming video games, maybe we could help more children out. Maybe we could make more programs, make them appear more cool for the children to attend. And if we did this, for one, we could stop blaming video games needlessly because they're not the reason. And we can take more positive steps by focusing on the real problem, which is, again, their environment. And for those who still believe video games are to blame for some of the violent acts, well, adolescent violence is at a 30-year low. And seeing as how the video game industry has been expanding exponentially for the past few years, it just doesn't add up. Now, what happens next? What happens when we begin to focus on the real issue? Well, countless lives, for one, will be saved. The grief felt by family members who lose loved ones, they will no longer have to deal with issues such as that. Video games would no longer get a bad reputation like they have been. They will no longer be blamed. And the companies who make the video games will no longer be blamed as well and suffer grief. All in all, this wouldn't prevent everything bad from ever occurring again. There are still going to be bad things that happen. Instances such as Columbine may happen again. However, if we begin by focusing on the real problem, like the environment, we could prevent some from ever occurring again and take steps in the right direction. So ultimately what we need to do is focus on the real issue and not video games. We need to stop using video games as a scapegoat.